Hello, everyone. Welcome to Langer at the Mic. I'm Mike Langer. The NHL draft is less than 48 hours away. I don't know about you, but I am so excited, but also kind of just waiting for it to happen already. Kind of like the prospects, I guess we just got to try to live in the moment a little bit, but just with how much we've been talking about it, hyping it up for these last not just weeks, but months, ever since the Canadians have had a difficult season last year. We've just been talking all about it. So I just personally can't wait for it to happen. But I'm also excited for it to happen. We've talked so much about Shane Wright versus Yuri Slavkovsky. We've talked about also Logan Cooley, who seems to have entered the conversation now that general manager Kent Hughes mentioned that they're interested or they're having a hard time deciding between the top three prospects. So I'm assuming that means Logan Cooley. We've talked about Jeff Petrie, Josh Anderson, trading up, trading down, trading left, trading right. So tonight, as promised, I want to talk about you guys in your comments because, as I've mentioned, I don't just appreciate you guys for listening, but I also appreciate your opinions and I really want to hear what you guys have to say. And I find it like I've responded to some of your comments, but I really feel like I'm better off, or we are better off to just feature your comments in this type of live stream every week and just have a live discussion because it just feels that much more direct. So I'll be reading through your comments and responding to them live. This is something that I like to do on a regular basis if possible. Maybe not as much during the off season, or at least the dog days of the off season. We'll definitely have opportunities with free agency upcoming, and all the moves that the Canadians are likely going to make. So the only rule, though, for this type of live stream, though, or for me to feature comments on my videos is that you must be subscribed to youtube.com/Langer at the mic. And I will gladly feature your comment in one of these live streams. So now let us get started. Welcome in, by the way, Randy. Randy's one of our longtime guests, one of our longtime subscribers here to Langer at the mic. We'll start with Randy's question first, since he's in the live chat here. Question: why get a center? Nick Suzuki becomes a second line center. Dvorak a third line center. Because Randy, that is the ultimate goal. Is you want. I don't think Dvorak is a suitable or is a guy that you want to be a second line center unless your first line center maybe is Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon or Austin Matthews, and playing on their wings is Alex Ovechkin and Gabriel Landeskog or not Val Nichushkin, blanking out on Mikko Rantanen. There you go. Took me a while to get there. David Pastrnak. So to me, you want like Nick Suzuki is a franchise caliber center. He might not be at the level of McDavid, Matthews, McKinnon. He might not be at that level, but he is still he's still young and he could turn into one of the best two-way centers in the NHL. But the key is to win is you want to be deep down the middle and you want to build, you want to have more than just one franchise center. The Colorado Avalanche had that in Nazem Kadri, who stepped up behind Nathan McKinnon. The Tampa Bay Lightning have that with Steven Stamkos and Braden Point, but then also Anthony Cirelli, who is a tremendous shutdown forward. The Tampa Bay Lightning also had Nick Paul, who emerged as a guy that can be a two-way center as well. I don't think he's at the level of a franchise center. He's kind of forced into being that second line center or third line center for now for Tampa because of their cap situation. But the issue is, you basically want to be as deep as you can down the middle. And the Canadians had that last year when they won or when they went to the Stanley Cup final between Philip Deneau, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and Nick Suzuki and Eric Stahl. They were underratedly deep down the middle, especially with how all of them performed in the playoffs. So you want to try to recreate that. And you have a perfect opportunity to do that with Shane Wright sitting right there with the first overall pick. Sure, there are other centers in this draft, Connor Geeky, Frank Nazar, that could be available later on. But you really want to try to get that center that you can develop behind Nick Suzuki. And Christian Dvorak, I think at this point, is a perfect stopgap because he could be a second line center for now, while Shane Wright or possibly Logan Cooley or whoever else they end up drafting in 2 nights from now I think Dvorak is the perfect veteran stopgap to that. He has a couple of years left on his contract at $4 million per season. So I think he's the perfect guy to stopgap that, but I don't think he's someone that you want long term as your second line center behind Nick Suzuki. So that is why the long version of why you want to get Shane Wright. And yes, you do want Christian Dvorak to eventually be your third line center. And if you're really happy with what you have in Suzuki and Shane Wright, or whoever again you drafted, whether it's Logan Cooley or Shane Wright that they draft in 2 nights from now, then if they become really, really good as a 1-2 punch, then Dvorak could become expendable, could be tradable. And then you have Ryan Poehling and Jake Evans to fill out the rest of the center ice position. So the Canadiens are in a position where they can absolutely stack their center depth for years to come. And that's why you want to add to it with the opportunity you have in the draft. Heard the Habs will not have a lot of wiggle room to get into the free agent frenzy. So this is something, an article that was written in the Gazette today. I forget who it was. Actually, my dad had texted it to me. I just kind of took a bit of a lazy day off today, not going to lie. But so Christian Dvorak, the cap situation of the Montreal Canadiens is as follows. Because they acquired Evgeny Dadonov, I'm just pulling it up right over here. They do have very little cap space, $1.9 million to be exact. But with the Carey Price situation, if Carey Price goes on long-term injured reserve, well, that'll open up about $10.5 million. But then if Carey Price ends up coming back, well, then you're going to have to find a way to clear $10.5 million in a hurry and a half. So that's why the Canadiens at this stage don't have a lot of wiggle room in terms of their cap. But that doesn't mean that there aren't a couple of moves that could be made that will open that up. If Jeff Petrie ends up getting traded, if Josh Anderson ends up getting traded, Petrie's worth $6.2 million a season. Josh Anderson is worth $5.5 million per season. So that will create cap space. And also another thing to consider is that Dadonov, who's at $5 million a season, Paul Byron, who's at 3.4, and Jonathan Drouin, who is on IR, I guess right now. Yeah, there he is, 5.5. That will all come off the books next year. So the Canadiens will have a lot of cap space moving forward into next year, but then they also have to sign Cole Caulfield to a massive extension of probably $8 or $9 million a season, especially if he ends up being really, really good again this year. Now, Connor Bedard, on a future draft, is Connor Bedard a center or winger? I would say, it doesn't matter. He's Connor friggin' Bedard. He'll be a generational player, I think, for years to come, but I don't think the Canadiens will have an opportunity to get him unless they are very lucky again and win another lottery, which I don't like to depend on. I made a previous video on that. I don't like to depend on winning the lottery. I'd like to depend on drafting the best player available at the picks that you have, developing them, and allowing them to be great players or productive players for your team. The Habs cap so tight again, Randy. I'll get a couple more, Randy, and I know this is blocking my face right here. But with the Habs cap so tight, what are the chances that the Habs can trade the likes of Petrie, Hoffman, Drouin, or who have high salaries without having to get back players with their salaries? So I would say Hoffman could be moved because he does not have no movement or no trade clauses on his contract right now. Petrie does. So for Petrie to get moved, it'll have to be to a place that he wants to get traded to. Drouin also, I believe, has a no movement clause. Let me just confirm that. He has a modified no trade clause. So again, he will also have to get traded to a place that he wants to go. One more Randy here, just then I'll get to other people's comments from a couple of days ago. Why not build a future with Josh Anderson? I feel like he is a quality winger who you can build on. So the reason why people, I think, want to trade Josh Anderson, why the Canadiens are considering it, is because he is in his prime right now at 25, 26 years old. So yeah, he's in his prime right now. And the thought is that by the time he's 28 years old, actually, is that by the time the Canadiens are in a window to contend, he will be 31, 32 years old. And with the way he plays, speed, he has the size, but speed, physicality, he could end up wearing down with that style of play, kind of like Brendan Gallagher did. But then again, Anderson does have the size to maybe withstand it for a little bit longer. But the point is, Anderson's value is at its highest right now. And if there is an opportunity to move that contract, which in a few years from now, up until Josh Anderson, up until 2027 at $5.5 million, where he'll be 28, 29, 30, 31, 32 years old. I don't know if that will be a very good contract at that point. So if you want to get rid of it, now is the time to do so. Comment now from Philippe Saint Laurent, 12, earlier today. This was in reference to the video I posted earlier today about the Canadiens' top boomer bust prospects that could fall to the Habs at 26 or 33. Philippe Saint Laurent really hopes that we grab Maverick Lamoureux, 6'7" defenseman, great skater, just puck moving potential. The only issue, and I like him as well, I just think he's a little bit on the raw side, and he's going to be a project. Like, he's definitely a boom or bust player, and he's also a right-handed defenseman. So, I guess I could have added him to my list yesterday. I just think the boom potential isn't as high as with some of the other guys that I mentioned yesterday in my video, but I do really like him in the mid second round, or if he falls to the third round, that would be a perfect opportunity for the Canadiens to try to land him. Luneau also. The thing with Luneau, I feel like he'd be more. I think Luneau, as I mentioned in that video, also Tristan Luneau out of Gatineau, his skating is a little bit. His skating isn't as great as it should be, but he was a very reliable two-way defenseman and a right-handed defenseman as well. So the Canadiens, they got plenty of young left-handed defensemen, young left-handed two-way defensemen to boot, guys like Romanov, Goulet, Harris. So to me, there's definitely a need for a right-handed defenseman, and I know Logan Mailloux is in the system, but he is a couple of years away just because of the whole incident from last year. I think he's doing. He needs to really earn it, and he's a couple of years away. But if he does earn it, and if everything works out, Mailloux could be really, really good. But then also Justin Barron, who they acquired in the Lehkonen trade. I don't know if he'll be a number 2 or number 1 defenseman, but he's certainly a guy that can play on the second or third pairing on the right side for several years to come. But then again, just that's where Tristan Luneau or Maverick Lamoureux, right-handed defenseman, could really be beneficial to the Canadiens in terms of adding to their depth on the right side in their system. Chris LeBlanc, like the sound of Leon Bichelle as well. Hard to say if he'll be available. The thing I didn't love about Bichelle, though, is I didn't really love his upside. I think he'll be more of a high floor, low ceiling type of guy. Also, Nathan Gaucher out of Quebec, the Quebec Ramparts, big center who scored a lot of goals in Q this year. But scouts are saying that he is more of a bottom six guy. Like, he's a guy that, don't get me wrong, could do a lot of things that will help you win. Like, just with his size, with his defensive responsibility, his two-way game, his physicality as well. But just he doesn't have that offensive scoring touch or that offensive upside that you'd kind of want if you're going to take a chance. So, and all this to say is it would be more of a single than trying to swing for a home run, which is fine because the Canadiens have picks 26 and 33. But if you're looking to draft potential superstars in the late first round and second and third rounds, then Gaucher might not be that guy. Philippe Saint Laurent again. Well done, all plausible regarding the Petrie trades I made last week. Although with the Ryan McDonough trade of a couple of days ago, we basically got traded for Bupkis, Felipe Myers, and some other minor league player from the Tampa Bay Lightning. The difference, though, like I don't know, like I know some of those trades I made or offers that I made were a little bit of a stretch because it was more of trying to find the best deals that would suit the Canadiens' needs with the teams. Like, let's say for the Detroit Red Wings, like first round pick. The only thing I could really see that the Canadians would want from Detroit is obviously the 8th overall pick, but Petrie would probably not be enough of a value to move from 26 to 8. Would definitely not be enough of a value. But anyway, but still, I like the Dallas Stars and I like the Pittsburgh Penguins in terms of trading for a mid first round pick. It might still be a little bit of a stretch, which is why Kent Hughes mentioned yesterday that if there isn't a move that they can make for Jeff Petrie, then they're not going to make it. They're going to keep him. And chances are Petrie might just be okay with that because he really enjoyed playing under Martin St. Louis. And there isn't hopefully going to be another pandemic wave that will set us all back and just tighten up the border restrictions. And also Pierre-Elliott Trudeau Airport isn't nearly as bad as Toronto Pearson Airport in terms of customs. So all this to say, it actually might work out for Jeff Petrie to stay here if there isn't a move that can be made for the Montreal Canadiens to get like a good value in return. Because keep in mind, he's still their number one defenseman. Derek Roberts are here. Just another comment from Randy here. I think the Habs have 13 to 14 picks this year. Would you trade 3 or 4 picks with a player to jump into the first round or second round? Yeah, so look, this is a huge point of discussion. I know I'm kind of blocking my face here. Hello. But this is a huge point of discussion because, yeah, the Canadians have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yes, 14 picks in the draft this year, Randy. And you're not going to sign all 14 players to entry-level contracts realistically. So that is why there is a lot of discussion in terms of them moving picks to trade up. And Kent Hughes mentioned that it is more likely that the Canadians will trade up than it is that they'll trade back from the first overall pick. So, but the good thing is with all these picks is that it enables them to be aggressive and swing for the fences with their draft picks instead of trying to hit singles and try to find real, guys that could be superstars in this late first round and second round and third round with all these picks, because you could afford to miss on some of them. They don't all have to make it into the NHL, it's your organization. You can afford to miss on some of them, but you could also, like you're saying, Randy, is trade up and try to get a higher value player that is falling. If they're still available a couple of picks ahead of you, you could definitely trade up. And that's why I think the Canadians will trade up at some point in the first 2 rounds of the draft on Thursday night. Philip Saint Laurent, blah, blah, blah. Derek Roberts a couple of days ago. Just regarding the Shane Wright. So the Canadians draft Shane Wright first overall, and you could do this with Slavkovsky and Cooley as well, but more so for Shane Wright because he wore pretty much the same number in all of junior. What number would you want to see Shane Wright wear for the Montreal Canadiens? Let me know in the comment section below. Would you rather number 15 or number 51? 51, the number he wore in junior, number 15 that he wore at all international championships or tournaments with Team Canada. But then also Jesperi Kotkaniemi memories, which we might want to move on from. So, but then again, like I would prefer 51. David Desharnais memories as well. But yeah, just let me know what number you'd prefer for Shane Wright in the comment section below. And what number should Juraj Slavkovsky or Logan Cooley wear if they are the pick to the Canadians at first overall? Juraj Slavkovsky is worn number 20, which is Chris Weidman's number, and Logan Cooley has worn number 38 with the U.S. National Development Program. Randy says number 51 and can't wait to see a year without Trevor Timmins as head of scouting for the Habs. Now, the thing with Trevor Timmins is it feels like every time he got the pick right, pun intended, maybe, the Canadians failed to develop that pick. And when the Canadians tried to develop that pick, it was the wrong pick. So what I mean by that is Ryan McDonough. Canadians got the pick right, but they traded him away, right? Then Michael McCarron, they tried to make it work with Michael McCarron, didn't work. They tried to make it work with Louis LeBlanc, didn't work. But then guys like Artturi Lehkonen, low risk, second round pick, safe player. That was a single to a double, I would say, Artturi Lehkonen, because he has turned into a very clutch playoff performer who the Canadians only really experienced a year of, which is fine because they got good value in return for Lehkonen, and obviously he scored the conference final winning goal and the Stanley Cup final winning goal for the Colorado Avalanche. But yeah, so it just feels like the Canadians with Trevor Timmins, it just never really, it very rarely aligned in terms of when they got the pick right and when they developed and how they developed that player. A couple of instances where it has succeeded again was Arturi Lehkonen, Jake Evans, but on a larger scale, PK Subban, Max Pacioretty, Cole Caulfield, Caden Gooley. So there were some big hits that Trevor Timmins has had, but the Alex Galchenyuk and the Jesperi Kotkaniemi, that was those are the ones that pretty much cost Timmins his job. And I guess you could say failing to identify guys like Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov, but then the entire NHL failed to identify them as well. So yeah, Sergachev, yeah, Mikhail Sergachev, there you go. It's another example where Trevor Timmins got the pick correct, but Marc Bergevin and the Montreal Canadiens on the pro level just felt more interested in acquiring Jonathan Drouin and not developing Mikhail Sergachev, which in hindsight, like at the time, I understand why they did it, but obviously when I saw that they did that, I was like, I wasn't very high on that move at the time that it happened. It was just about, what was it, 2017, so 5 years ago around this time. Yeah, it was like late June 2017. So I remember I was in Mont Tremblant with I was in Mont Tremblant with my girlfriend at the time and visiting my family. It was an interesting weekend because then also, we're having a fun weekend with family, but then, Canadians traded away Sergachev and, the Canadians signed Carl Alsner, which was actually kind of happy about. But then I think it was the Markov news and the Radulov news. Anyway, I digress. Yeah. So now do you see Maverick Fisher? Do you see number 31 Price retire because of injuries, or do we have to put him on LTIR for the next 4 years, and why? So Carey Price, I just think the Canadians, it's very simple. The Canadians have to assume that Carey Price will not be healthy. And if he is healthy, that will be a bonus. And they have to plan the offseason accordingly. They have to sign. Kent Hughes stated a couple months ago, he admits that the Canadians do not have a capable number one goaltender in their organization right now outside of Carey Price. So that means they will probably have to acquire one in free agency or via trade this offseason, because I just, or maybe they'll decide to not be very serious about competing next year, which I don't completely agree with. But yeah, the good news is they do have Caden Primo, who I think will be that guy in a couple of years, but not just yet. Again, we have to be very patient with goaltenders and their development. Carey Price has just happened to be a guy that pretty much emerged as a star goaltender already in his early 20s. So yeah, a tandem of Allen and Montembeault is just a sign of a lower 8 team finish. Like, yeah, I really, really like Jake Allen. By the way, I really respect Jake Allen for in the beginning of the season when the Canadians were just like beyond awful, where they couldn't score, they couldn't defend, they couldn't kill penalties, they couldn't score on the power play. They if they scored a goal by accident, but one guy who showed up to play every single game, every single night, and gave it his all, no matter what the score was, Jake Allen. And that is why I have a tremendous amount of respect for Jake Allen. And I think even though he might not be a number one goaltender that could play 60 games, I think that what he's doing right now, if he's playing 40 games, 30 to 40 games with another guy who's playing 30 to 40 games with Caden Primo, who plays about 10 to 15 games, I think you can not contend with that, but you can be competitive with that. I'll say you can fight for a playoff spot with that in net, possibly, maybe. So anyway, a couple of other things I want to get to from a couple of days ago. There was the number on Shane Wright, Michel Desormeaux. So if the Canadians get 13, 18, and 26, this was related to, again, a couple of crazy trade scenarios. If they managed to trade Petrie and Anderson for first-round picks, which there was rumors of it. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it was definitely a discussion a couple of days ago. picking good three players, or three good players: Shane Wright, Brad Lambert, and Ivan Miroshnichenko, if I'm saying that right, and Tristan Luneau. So that would be quite the haul. And the only thing, though, is like I really like Miroshnichenko. Got to get that right. Um, yeah, I think I actually really like him, but he could be another wild card because he is just a tremendously talented goal scorer. I don't know if he'll be an Ovechkin or like a Rantanen, but I think he could be maybe a David Pastrnak, or he's being compared to Philip Forsberg. But he did get diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So obviously, I really hope that he gets to still have a productive hockey career, but that could allow him to fall. And I honestly maybe should have included him as a player that the Canadians could go up to get if he ends up slipping in the teens. And Tristan Luneau, we discussed already before, could be a very solid, reliable two-way defenseman, but maybe even better if he improves his skating. 10. Is there a chance that Yoel Armia gets traded from Renegade? Renegade Man 83. Is there a chance Yoel Armia gets traded? Yeah, absolutely. I think he has. He's not on an ideal contract, but one thing he has proved in the playoffs and at the World Hockey Championship, World Cup, World Cup of Hockey, World Hockey, the World Cup tournament in April and May, is that he is a gamer. That was difficult for me to say. But anyway, is that Yoel Armia, he is a gamer. He shows up when it matters, when it counts. He is, even if he's not scoring, he isn't completely disappearing and irrelevant. He's still making plays for his line mates. He's still creating scoring chances. He is a bull as a forechecker and very tough to play against for the opposing defenseman. So I think that does still carry some value to a team that would want him at the trade deadline. But again, the only issue is his contract. He's under contract for another 2 seasons after this one at $3.4 million. So basically the Paul Byron contract, which you want to see maybe a little bit more consistency out of him to acquire that deal. I would not be mad if a Petrie and a healthy Edmonton return to form. I would not be mad about that as either. I just, like Joel Edmondson and Jeff Petrie are maybe not, like, they're definitely not one of the best top pairings in the NHL, but they're a very reliable top pairing that if you insulate that well with the kids having, developing well and rounding into their roles properly, guys like Romanov and Gouli, Harris, if they all round into form as well, the way they're expected to, well, then you have a pretty good defense core going into next year, which again isn't anything close to what the Lightning have or what the Colorado Avalanche have, but still very respectable in terms of possibly competing for a playoff spot. Thoughts on Maverick Fisher, thoughts on Jack Hughes, Kent Hughes' son, and Marty St. Louis boy in the draft. Very simple. I mentioned this yesterday. The Canadians should not be taking Jack Hughes or any of their sons if they have the opportunity to do so. Any sons of managers or coaches should not be drafted or signed, because what that does is it creates a conflict of interest. And the last thing that you want is what you see in double letter, minor hockey, AAA, whatever, minor hockey up until probably as far even into the queue, but just, you don't want to have a conflict of interest where you have a coach or a GM that wants to give his son or her son or their son, whatever, because a lot of female, Haley Wickenheiser just became the assistant GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs today, which is really good for them. And I'm very happy about that. But anyway, point is you do not want to have the sons of managers in a position where, like, if they're not playing as well, but just someone slightly better than them, but because they're someone's son, you're going to favor them over the person that is slightly better than them. And that just creates a family business and just not a healthy organizational structure. So just very simple, long story short, do not create a conflict of interest in your own organization. So do not go after Jack Hughes or any other children or offspring of managers or coaches. End of story. Renegade Man 83. What would the Jets asking price for Pierre-Luc Dubois be? Is he worth a chance via trade or free agency? Okay, so back to Pierre-Luc Dubois. I made a video about this Renegade Man a couple of weeks ago. You should check that out on my here on my channel. But so Pierre-Luc Dubois is, man, I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. Pierre-Luc Dubois is, I don't know if he is a guy that has just found himself in multiple bad situations or if he is the bad situation. And that is why I would be very, very careful with going after Pierre-Luc Dubois, because if as soon as things started not going well for him in Columbus, he whined his way out of Columbus. As soon as things started not going so well in Winnipeg, he whined his way out of Winnipeg. But then again, who would want to play? What kind of skilled player would want to play for John Tortorella anyway? And it just sounded like there was a whole lot of just it was a whole lot of drama behind the scenes in the Winnipeg Jets between Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler and Patrick Laine when he was there a couple of years ago before Pierre-Luc Dubois. It just seemed like there was a lot of just a conflict within the dressing room, and maybe Pierre-Luc Dubois wanted no part of it. But if he is unable to get through adversity in Columbus and Winnipeg in smaller markets, well, then what if things start going wrong for him in Montreal? How's he going to react to that? So that's the first thing I'm concerned about with Pierre-Luc Dubois. The second thing, possibly the more obvious thing, is that you would have to give up assets to get him. And if the Canadiens could just take a center in the draft without giving up any assets, i.e. Shane Wright with the first overall pick, well, then why would you want to go after another top centerman and give up assets to get him? And I know off the top I mentioned Christian Dvorak. Like, you want to keep Christian Dvorak with Shane Wright and Nick Suzuki, but the difference is Christian Dvorak would be more of a stopgap. Pierre-Luc Dubois you'd be bringing in to be a long-term fixture at your center ice position. So that's why you have to give up assets to get him. And I just think that the situation where Pierre-Luc Dubois could maybe make sense is if the Canadiens end up taking Slavkovsky first overall. That's where Pierre-Luc Dubois could maybe make sense. But even then, what I mentioned, if he is the bad situation, if he just feels like he wants to play in Montreal now, but then a couple months in and the Habs aren't winning and he realizes, oh my God, this sucks and I want out, well, then what are the Canadiens going to do then? So the point is, Pierre-Luc Dubois, long story short, just kind of let it slide for now. And if there's an opportunity to get him for Bupkis, and if the Canadiens still have a bloody need for center in a couple of years from now, then sure, explore it. But for now, I wouldn't touch it. Gotta go up to Randy here. Thoughts on the coach carousel these past few weeks? Why would Paul Maurice and Rick Bowness come back to coaching after self-firing themselves with their respective teams? Okay, so coaching carousel. First of all, the hockey, for whatever reason, has a tendency, or the NHL specifically, has a tendency to recycle experienced coaches. So coaches that have coached 500, 700, let's say at least 750 games, they'll always get another opportunity. And I just think that I don't personally agree with it, but just teams that want to win or teams that think they're entering a window to contend, they'd rather be safe than sorry and take a coach with experience over a coach over a coach that's inexperienced and might kind of just over an inexperienced coach. So, but I will say though, Rick Bowness, I think is I really like Rick Bowness. The job that he did in Dallas. I really liked what he did in Dallas. So I think he'll be just fine in Winnipeg. But but then again, it's like I feel like now's the time to also, like, if you're a team that wants to rebuild, you should not be hiring a coach with experience. You should be hiring a coach like Marty St. Louis and just kind of trying to go for something off, little, what's the expression? Just, I guess something new, or again, forgetting just you want to go in a new direction. You want to try something a little bit out away from the norm, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But if, and that's the thing where I think Winnipeg could be in a little bit of a weird situation, is if they end up being a rebuilding team, then why would you hire a coach with experience? But I think Paul Maurice in Florida makes a lot of sense because they're trying to win now. So they wanted to get a coach with experience. I think that's why it makes sense for Florida. The Habs select the Czech winger, Slovak or Czech winger? Because if we're talking Slavkovsky here, I'm assuming, Randy, would it make sense for the Devils to choose right while they have Hughes? I think the Devils would be, yeah, honestly, I think it would make sense to the Devils because if Nico Hischier, who did have a respectable season this past year, like what's to say that if Shane Wright and Nico Hischier would end up just battling it out for whoever's better, and that's who they would commit to long term, along with Jack Hughes. So I think, yeah, I just think the Devils would be willing to beef up their center ice position with Wright and Hughes and Hischier if they had the chance to. So, like, look, it all comes down to best player available, right? So if Shane Wright falls to the Devils because the Habs take Slavkovsky, I think the Devils have also stated that they would be totally fine taking Shane Wright, and I honestly wouldn't blame them because Jack Hughes is right now the most established center that they have, and Nico Hischier again had a good season this year, but he hasn't really proven himself as he's proven himself as a good center. Don't get me wrong, but not as a star caliber center. So if Shane Wright could be that star caliber center, then they would be right to take, right, pun intended, to take that opportunity with Shane Wright if he were to fall to him. Renegade Man would be nice if Corey Perry pulled a Marian Hossa. At least he won the Stanley Cup with the Ducks, but going to the Stanley Cup Finals 3 times in a row and getting shut out sucks. Yeah, at least Corey Perry got to win the cup in 2007 with the Ducks. So at least that is working out for him, because if he didn't have that cup in 2007, man, that would just suck even more than it already does suck for him. But yeah, we'll see what Corey Perry does this offseason. It'll be very interesting. Chris Bergeron or Bergeron. Okay, if we take Slav, I feel like it's because we have secured a top 10 pick for maybe Savoie or who knows. I wouldn't assume anything. Like, the only time I would take Slavkovsky because we have secured a top 10 pick is if the Canadians actually have that other top 10 pick before they take Slavkovsky, if that makes sense. So in other words, I would take, but even then, if Shane Wright is the better player, you take Shane Wright. And Shane Wright has been deemed as the better player for the past, ever since he's 15 years old. So for the past 2-3 years, whereas Slavkovsky has just come up as one of the best players, or has been seen as the best player in this class for just the last couple of months since he lit up the Olympics. Again, AHL level competition in the Olympics, and Kazakhstan and France in the World Cup. So that's what I'm basing it off of. Larger sample size, perhaps, again, just maybe a down year in his draft year. Braden Point also, I just learned this yesterday, or relearned this yesterday, that Braden Point had a better year as an 18-year-old with the Moose Jaw Warriors in the WHL than he had as a 19-year-old. In fact, let me just reconfirm that, because this is relevant. And again, just based off stats, over here. Yeah, so Braden Point, the year before he got drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2013-14, 91 points in his draft year. Still went all the way down to the third round for some reason. He was a minus 27. I don't know what that has to do with anything. But then as a 19-year-old with Moose Jaw, 87 points in 60 games. So, I mean, didn't play as many games, but, a slight dip in production as a 19-year-old, even though he was an older player. And then he had like 88 points in 48 games as in his final year with Moose Jaw. So all this to say, it's like, look, there's a lot of variety, or a lot of variance, I guess, just from year to year. You'd like to see players take steps forward, but at the end of the day, it's really just about how good are they over a long period of time and not just in one season. Because Chris Kreider, he scored 50 goals this year. Now, not to say that Chris Kreider is a bad player. He's a very effective player for the New York Rangers. And yes, bringing up, memories of him running into Carey Price in 2014. But to say that to say that Chris Kreider is a perennial 50 goal scorer based on one season that he scored 50 goals is, you can't say that unless he scores 50 goals every year. So what I'm saying is, again, you want to draft players based on what they've done over a longer period of time and not just in a short sample size. I'm going to get back to, there's a couple of comments I want to get to again from a previous few days, and I'll get to the live chatters here. Jeffrey Soumayan, New Jersey. This was something from talking about the Anderson trades and all that a couple of days ago. New Jersey would accept Anderson for a 26th overall pick and Logan Mailloux for the second overall pick. Would do that right away. Then you trade Petrie in the 33rd pick for another first round pick. For me, it is clear CH can right now change their future with Wright and Slavkovsky. If we have to give one of our 2 first round pick for next year, is also fine. We will not be in position for Bedard next year. Future is now. Okay, so a lot to unpack. That created a huge chain of responses from that a couple of days ago. It'll take a lot more to move up to second overall than Josh Anderson, the 26th, and Logan Mailloux. Let's be clear on that, Jeffrey. But I do agree that if the Canadiens do have an opportunity to get 2 stars out of this draft class, that would be huge, but not at the expense of Connor Bedard. And then Michel Desormeaux responded a couple of times if we were lucky to get a second overall pick. This is an interesting opinion for Michel here, and I'll get back to your comments in a second here in the live chat, and I want to hear what you think about this. If the Canadiens were to get us the second overall pick and take Shane Wright first, what about David Jiricek or Simon Nemec? What if it's would you rank them higher than Slavkovsky? And I think that there could be a case for that if, again, Logan Mailloux is a huge wild card. Justin Barron isn't going to be a number 1 defenseman. But what if David Jiricek or Simon Nemec could end up being that type of player? Slav may get you 25 goals per year, what Josh Anderson has already given you, but also Slavkovsky, if he pans out to what his highest upside could be 30, 40 goals a season consistently. But again, his downside could be, again, barely 20 goals a year. But at the end of the day, you need a franchise all-around centerman more so than you need a scoring winger to go deep in the playoffs. And then I think it was at MS the same. It might have been Michel again saying would not waste second overall pick on Slav. Yeah, just again saying Wright, Nemec, Cooley, Gauthier, Jiricek. I'm more of a fan of Nemec and Cooley and Jiricek, obviously, than over Cutter Gauthier. I would expect to trade with Philadelphia for 5th overall, or maybe with Columbus and their new coach. Saf will be a disappointment. Habs be a number 1 center, top right-handed D and scoring wingers. So clearly, Michel Desormeaux isn't huge on Slavkovsky, and I wouldn't be that low on Slavkovsky, but again, I'm still taking Shane Wright over Juraj Slavkovsky personally. All right, now back to the live chat here. Guli, Barrett, Harris, Romanov. Top 4 for the Habs in the future. Do you see Norlinder being trade bait or part of the Habs' future? So this is from Renegade Man over here. So Norlinder, I think, is still a project. Norlinder has not shown that he has been able to establish himself in the North American game in the AHL just yet. Also, I was actually at the game where he got hit from behind by some goon on the Rochester Americans, and I think that kind of affected the rest of his playoff run. So he has to learn to, well, I mean, that's what sucks about the AHL is that you have some guys that are actually trying to make it to the NHL, but you also have guys that are complete NHL write-offs and just goons that are trying to be relevant in the AHL. So that's just the way it is. But still, the point is Norlinder's value isn't very high right now. So because of that, I would say you want to keep developing him in Laval, see if he can maybe round out his game and become that offensive defenseman or offensive threat that we're expecting him to be. But at this time right now, his value isn't very high or wouldn't expect it to be. So I just plug him in Laval, let him develop, give him time, and see what happens. Randy, again, from the mediocrity that the Habs have been through with Jacques Martin, Claude Julien, Terrien, blah, blah, blah. Wouldn't mind sucking again to rebuild like Tampa and Colorado. But here's the thing. You have to be very careful when it comes to like just sucking on purpose or tanking on purpose for the sake of tanking. And again, this is another video I made a couple weeks ago is yeah, you could end up like Colorado. Yeah, you could end up like Tampa, but you could also end up like Buffalo or Edmonton until they found McDavid, or even the Toronto Maple Leafs, who, despite being at the end of their rebuild for 3 years now, still can't get out of the first round. So my point is, you want to like to me, a rebuild process is, yeah, it starts because you have a team that is that just a bunch of guys that are past their primes, and you had a difficult season, so you had to trade a bunch of veterans and players in their primes, and basically you get a high draft pick. That's where it starts. But you also have to take a step forward each season. You have to get better and better with each year. Now, the Canadians were god awful last year, and I don't see them being god awful again next year. But you want to see the positive moments that we saw this past year, like when they won 5 games in a row under Martin St. Louis, like when Cole Caulfield became essentially a point per game player under St. Louis. Basically, everything that you saw, everything positive that you saw under Martin St. Louis, you want to see that more consistently over the course of an 82 game season instead of 5 or 10 game spouts. And that is what the Canadians should try to build towards next year. If that results in them making the playoffs, fantastic, because then whoever they drafted first overall, chances are they'll get to play in the playoffs. Chances are Guli, Romanov, and all the young kids that are going to be part of the team for a long time are going to get more playoff experience, and that is a good thing, not a bad thing. And if you end up losing the first round or barely making the playoffs and picking in the teens, so what? So what? You take the best player available, and it's a crapshoot, but and yeah, picking first overall, especially if you have a chance to take Connor Bedard or a McDavid Matthews type player, that helps you. But what helps you more is not just hitting on your top 5 picks, but also finding value in the teens, later first round, and even second and third rounds as well. That's how you build a contending team, is through the draft, something that the Canadians failed miserably at under Marc Bergevin, even though that was his mantra. So that is what would be the outcome of a successful rebuild, not tanking for the next 2 years, which becomes 5 years, which becomes 10 years. And next thing you know, you haven't made the playoffs in over a decade. So that's why you got to be careful with just sucking for a long time to make the playoffs, or to rebuild and essentially get a lot of high draft picks. It worked for Colorado, sure, but and Tampa got Stamkos and Hedman in the top 3, yes, but they also got Kucherov in the second round. They got Braden Point in the third round. They got they got Andre Palat like in the 6th, 7th round. They got Anthony Cirelli in I think it was the 4th round. They got Andre Vasilevsky in the teens. So all this to say is they basically built their team through the draft. And even Ross Colton, who 4th, 5th round pick, scores the cup final winning goal last year. So that's what it's about. It's about building through the draft, not just by accumulating a bunch of lottery picks, but by hitting on your. And also, here's the other thing: Cale Makar, that the Avalanche lost the lottery that year. The Dallas Stars, the New Jersey Devils, and the Philadelphia Flyers all picked ahead of the Avalanche in 2017, when they ended up getting the best player in the draft at 4 overall, Cale Makar. So even though the Avalanche have had top picks, they hit on those top picks. Landeskog, McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen. They hit on those picks, because if they had taken players that were not, if they took players that did not pan out, then they could just as well be in the same category as Buffalo or Edmonton before McDavid. So you have to be careful with that. That was a long-winded answer there, Randy. But anyway, Chris Bergeron, Slav is going to be more effective than Tom Wilson. Those guys win you cups and make guys like Caulfield much better. Yes, but in Washington, they also had Nicholas Backstrom, and they had Evgeny Kuznetsov and Lars Eller in a perfect role as a third-line center. And right now, the Canadians, they have a good mix of bottom six centers, but they do not have any. They don't have another. They have a Suzuki, but they don't have another Backstrom or Kuznetsov type player that can play down the middle. They don't have a Ryan O'Reilly after that. Like Suzuki is that type of two-way all-around player, all-around center. But apart from that, they need another Ryan O'Reilly or Nicholas Backstrom type of player, Patrice Bergeron, or even David Krejci type of player. I saw someone mention, or I saw someone who on Twitter said that that a scout told them that or compared Shane Wright more to David Krejci than Patrice Bergeron. But guess what? The Boston Bruins won with David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron back in 2011. Now, times were different back then. The Bruins were the big bad Bruins. They won with Lucic and Chara and Marchand and all that, and Nathan Horton up until the Cup final when he got KO'd by Aaron Rome. The like again, you need your centers to be all around franchise two-way players, arguably more so than you need your Tom Wilson, great is effective, but also Slavkovsky could end up being a Pacioretty where he disappears in the playoffs, where he against better competition in the Olympics and in the World Cup. Sure, he lights up Kazakhstan and France, but what about against the better competition? Not as much. And also in the 7 games that Slavkovsky has played at the World Juniors on North American ice, and I know the Olympics were on North American ice in China, Slavkovsky is pointless in his last 7 games in the World Juniors. I know that's years ago, and yes, he's developed since then, but again, centers more valuable than wingers, and that's the bottom line. Do you think Habs should stay away from drafting local guys, don't want another Louis LeBlanc? I think quite the opposite. I think the Canadians should get local guys, but the difference, and actually, I highly recommend you check this out on Tony Marinaro. Whether you love the guy or don't love the guy or hate the guy, he is. I have a lot of respect for him, and he just had a really great podcast for on the Sick podcast with Louis LeBlanc this past weekend, and basically the Louis LeBlanc situation. From that discussion, I really remembered, or just you're reminded of the fact the Canadians just put so much pressure on Louis LeBlanc to succeed because the draft was in Montreal that year in 2009. He was their first round pick. He was almost a point per game player in the USHL with the Omaha Lancers the year before. He decided to go to Harvard, but then got rushed back home to play with the Montreal Juniors, and then got rushed to play with the Montreal Canadiens when they weren't a very good team. And he was expected to be the savior. And so I just think that Louis LeBlanc was more of a case of just, or any player the Canadians are going to draft from Quebec, they got to put them in places to succeed. And they have to give them that opportunity to succeed and not put too much pressure on them and not set them up to fail, essentially, not give them more pressure responsibility than they can handle. So I think that's the issue is more just that, look, players like Philip Deneau was perfectly fine in Quebec, but he wasn't expected to be the savior of a franchise. He was just the guy who was behind Thomas Plekanec and Alex Galchenyuk, who emerged as a top 2 or a reliable two-way center that is one of the best centers in the game. And he ended up leaving because he wanted to make a lot of money, rightfully so. But again, point is with Philip Deneau is he was in a position to succeed. There was no pressure on him. He just emerged as just a guy that filled in as one of the top centers on the Montreal Canadiens, or just top two-way center on the Montreal Canadiens. And we took it from there. And he ended up being a great Hab, or a really good two-way center during his time as a Montreal Canadian. One more comment from Randy N here before we wrap it up. Just again, want to say, guys, really, this was a lot of fun, and I'm definitely going to be doing this more in the future throughout the off season. I'll be producing the videos, of course, as usual, but in addition, I definitely want to keep reading your comments and hearing what you guys have to say. Again, I don't just appreciate you guys tuning in to watch my videos, but I also appreciate what you guys have to say and your comments and your opinions. So that's why I definitely want to open the floor to this instead of, I just feel like it's a little more direct instead of just, texting back and forth in the comment section. So definitely going to keep up with this. But yeah, well, we got a couple more coming in here. Okay, we'll get to them. So too many first round picks will create a cap situation 5 years after their rookie contract. Then Habs will return to the seller again. That's true, Randy, in the sense that you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that's the situation the Toronto Maple Leafs are in right now. But if you also manage them a little better in terms of, just I guess giving or here, don't bring in a John Tavares. Easy. If the Toronto Maple Leafs didn't bring in John Tavares, like if they kept Nazem Kadri, and again, hindsight's 2020, and I at the time they had to get rid of Kadri because of just the fact that he was so unreliable in the playoffs. But yeah, just who knows if they did end up just sticking with Kadri and not signing John Tavares, then I think that's what really screwed the Toronto Maple Leafs more than anything is the Tavares contract. So I guess the point from Randy's comment is that you're gonna have to pay your draft picks, but you should also build around them appropriately and not bring in if you're going to bring in a Tavares type player, or if you're going to sign someone to a Tavares like contract, they better be Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, and not just a second line center. They got to be a 1A center, not just like a second line center making that kind of money. Chris Bergeron, great. You're hosting a great live day, Mister. Full of info and insight. Really appreciate it, Chris Bergeron. Be sure to subscribe. So again, that way, whenever you comment, I'll be featuring your comments, even if you're not able to tune into the live chat. But appreciate the kind words there, Monsieur Bergeron. Ian Idri, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Would you give PLD 3 times $7 million extension and give up first pick Petrie and Goulet? As Bergeron was saying, politely, no. Absolutely not, because remember the last time the Canadiens traded a high-end prospect defenseman for another French-Canadian player that they wanted to be a superstar, Jonathan Drouin for Sergachev. Remember how that turned out? Not too great. So, Pierre-Luc Dubois, you're trading for him when his value is at his lowest. You're trying to you're trying to give the Jets the least amount possible to get Pierre-Luc Dubois, and you're getting Pierre-Luc Dubois if you still have a need at center. So yeah, just absolutely not. And I think Caden Goulet, the Canadiens should not make the mistake of trading him. Just keep him, let him develop. Just he might not be the level of Hedman or Makar or whatever. Like, he's definitely not going to be a Makar, but he could still be a great top pairing defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens for years to come, and you do not trade Caden Goulet. He could be just I think the modern Shea Weber is a fair comparison for Goulet. Just maybe not as physical, maybe not as hard of a shot, but better skater, better all around. Yeah, just a better, more agile skater than Weber ever really was. And just the leadership, the intangibles. I think, Caden Goulet, I think you could definitely win with Goulet being one of your top 2 defensemen. Chris Bergeron, trade Drouin, Gallagher, Price, Dadonov, Petrie. Just guys that you're trying to get rid of more for the sake of getting rid of their contracts than trying to get value in return. Final question from Jeffrey Soumeyan. Habs have everything already to get the first pick of New Jersey. I put on the table. Okay, yeah. So I actually got to your comment here, Jeff, before. I mentioned it before. And I remember it just created a whole thread of comments after that, or responses after that. It's going to take a lot more than that to get the second overall pick, Jeff. If it was that simple, the Habs should absolutely pull the trigger on that deal, but it would take a lot more than Anderson, 26th overall pick, and Logan Mailloux. If Logan Mailloux were Cale Makar, then yeah. If he was lighting, if there wasn't the whole controversy with the sexual assault case last year, and if he was lighting up the OHL with the London Knights, then maybe, New Jersey would consider it. But at this point, Logan Mailloux is just still a project, both off the ice and on the ice, and he could end up being a great player. But as of right now, he's just a wild card. Anderson is, his value is, I think, a late first round pick, but not I just think the Canadians are still reluctant to trade him, and the 26th overall pick, like, yeah, just it's gonna take a lot more, Jeff, to trade up to number 2 with the Devils. But yeah, guys, again, hey, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for doing this. Again, we're over just past an hour on this stream here, guys. I didn't think it was gonna. I was ready to just call it after like 20 or 30 minutes, but you guys just kept it going with the comments, kept the engagement coming, and yeah. So again, really, really appreciate it. Definitely gonna do this again. If you enjoyed this, hit thumbs up, hit like, hit subscribe, and going forward, if you are not able to make the stream, the live stream, I will still feature your comment if you are subscribed. So that's why subscribe and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Mike Langer for both. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for tuning in and commenting. And I'll see you again next time. Go Habs, go, and have a good night.